at the time, so
No.
we want to meet that again.
This is important.
This is called order set to the capital program committee. It's Thursday, September 18th. It's 2:04 PM. And I'm gonna do a roll call. I'm Jill Veith.
Christie Kickham?
Caroline Bolster.
Liza Haddon.
We don't have anyone else online for staff.
I'm here.
for that. Oh, Dawn, there you are. You're not popping up. Welcome.
Hi.
Is there anyone else, Sue? Because we don't see Dawn up there.
Oh, that's interesting. No, it's only Dawn on Zoom.
Okay, and for staff purposes, we have here
Jeff Carlson? Vincent Murphy.
and Sue.
Sue Carmel?
And then is there anyone else, Sue, in case we can't see them?
No, there is not.
Okay. This meeting is being audio video recorded. Can I get approval of the agenda?
So moving.
Second.
And on your motion, Christie,
Aye.
Caroline.
Aye.
Liza,
Hi.
Dawn,
Hi.
Jill, I'm an aye. We are gonna open this to public comment. We are going to close public comment. I don't see anybody. Sue, do you see anyone? I'm just checking to make sure. Not missing anyone, because I still don't see Dawn.
No, there's nobody from the public on my end.
Okay. And with that, we're gonna open it up to Jeff Carlson and his. And Vince Murphy to review these projects. I think I just wanna. Jeff, maybe you could speak to this better than I can, but. We don't know that all of these projects are coming. This year, do we?
For FY 27.
Yeah, see, they sent us a list of everything for the out years too, including like, so for FY 28, they have Baxter Road in here and.
Yep.
Yeah, if you could just share
Sure,
with us
I'll
kind of
kind of
what
run
the
through
plan is for
Yeah,
the
and-
timeline of that.
absolutely. So, real quickly, I feel like I've met everyone before, so it's nice to see everyone. So just to kind of run through what's in front of us and just kind of the CIP in general for us. One of the things the town administration asked us to do was to get the recommendations of the coastal resiliency plan and a couple of the other relative plans like the hazard mitigation plan. And a few of the other initiatives that we've been working on, put into that 10-year outlook. The CRP is probably the most developed in that regards, where there's actual like costings and timelines and timeframes. I think understanding with all of those that one, the original CRP was done in $2020. We tried to update to $2025 for updating from here on out. But I think as we know, and kind of as the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee moves through these, the dates in the out years are a little flexible to react to real conditions for what's happening. Obviously. So it's living in kind of that way where it's not 100% set in stone, where we're like, we said it's going in 2031, so it's going in 2031 no matter what. So
Right,
it's a little bit flexible, but I also think we wanted to get the numbers in today. And I think what we'll probably do is, again, as we do these year to year, update those. Just so people can kind of see that those projects exist, this is what's happening. This is kind of the roadmap that plan is laid out. I mean, that plan is on paper through 2070 in some regards. I think none of us can predict what's gonna be happening in 2070, and God willing, none of us will be sitting around this table in 2070 talking about these things, so. We'll see what's, gonna happen there.
well, you're kind of raising a good point that I wouldn't mind you both already not. Get into this, which is, we look at coastal resiliency projects, and I'm so glad you put them in there because it is showing, it's a lot over a period of time. I know what is for the CRAC committee, are you looking at only 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? I know people people throw around these decades like it's nothing.
Mhm.
But, you know, I work in building and you can only build for something for so long, in my view. So that's, you know, what is kind of your guiding principle there?
If you don't mind.
Sure.
So within the CRP, it plans out as far as 2070. That's the time horizon it works on. But the
Was that
implementation,
state mandated or is that just like your own?
that's the best reliable data sets we have. We have data that goes out to 2100, but once you get past 2070, you
Yeah,
lose the confidence intervals. So it's not the best data to use after that point.
gotcha.
And the best federal and state data we have covers present day as it was in 2020, and for erosion, flooding, sea level rise, all of that kind of stuff. And then it looked at it in time intervals of 2030, 2050, and 2070. There is other federal data that goes beyond that. But for the implementation timeframe, we just looked at 15 years from
Yeah.
acceptance, from once the select board accepted the plan. So we looked at that as the implementation horizon to try and get these things done. We also realized and stated in the CRP, we want to try and get as much done as possible. It recognized that we might not necessarily be able to get everything done. That would put us in the best possible situation if we did, but some of those projects are so large that the planning and construction phases would easily stretch well beyond the 15-year implementation timescale. There's also a fact that we would look at probably updating the CRP at, say, the 10-year mark, maybe a little longer, depending on the town's need. So then at that point, we could hit the reevaluation in possibly another 5 years to see, well, what are we doing? How are we doing? Do we need to do more? Are we hitting our targets?
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think people, again, they kind of identify all these different decades and I'm like, I think be around.
Yeah. And really with projects this big, and I know it's not lost on you guys because you see it all the time, is those start dates for those projects, right, is Easy Street Flood Barrier is a good example where that project is really 2 years old now. And we're conservatively right around 20 to 25% through design and permitting, depending on how you want to evaluate that, and you probably have another minimum 2 years to get through final design. And then probably at least another year in permitting, depending on how permitting goes, and permitting's been kind of, I'll call it dynamic lately. There's been lots of changes at the state level where permitting's been really slow lately. Sometimes it goes faster, sometimes slower.
Mhm.
But you're really, you know, a project to get from that first concept through all of that for projects of this size and scale, but you're really looking at almost like a 5 to 6 year window just to get to there. And then, you know, we all get to get out the gold shovel and start that project depending on construction and timeframes and material availability that may be, depending on the size and scope of a project, that could be, 6 months, could be 2 years, but really, a lot of these transformative projects that are big and kind of the big ticket items in the CRP are almost a decade long project,
Oh,
just to
totally.
get from like start to kind of end.
Right.
And then, when you get to that end, also kind of like looking back and say, if we're gonna embark on another one of these somewhere else, what could have gone better and improved? So that kind of rescoping for the next one is probably another, 6 months to a year just to get kind of the debrief done for everybody to try to move through efficiently. So,
Well, and also in some of the sensitive areas, I mean, I think it's gonna take longer.
yeah, I mean, a lot of these projects, right, a lot of the real big ones are pushing against existing local and state regulations. And no one has really contemplated some of the management strategies that are gonna be needed to deal with some of these things, right? We're a little ahead of the curve in some regards where we're pushing the envelope and, you talk to the state regulators and they say things like, well, I haven't really thought about that. We'll have to think, or how do we make it work in the confines of that? Or do we need to make an adjustment or an exception and figure out how to do that? Sometimes that can cause delays and those things too. And, for us thinking about projecting costs, it gets super hard, looking back at 2020, materials were a lot different in cost than what they are now in 2025. So I wish they weren't, it'd be a lot easier if everything just stayed stable price, but it doesn't. But that's why, again, we're trying to list in our 10-year outlook in current dollars what we think they may be, but I think as we adjust year to year. You know, just as an example, like in FY 33, we're showing the Washington Street corridor improvements for $200 million. We'll probably next year, we'll probably update that number to account for what 2026 dollars they're doing. And also, you know, I'll make it sound like it's always gonna go up. There may be something that happens where we look at a strategy a little bit differently. And perhaps it may adjust down because the scope of that project gets rescaled or things that are there. So
Right,
it's dynamic, I will say, and Vince pointed out to me this morning, we were talking about it, the one project that's in here. That is the most likely to change and go down. Is in our natural resources, the Steamboat Wharf Resilience, the FY 30, the $120 million. That's a project that's slated for the Steamship Authority,
right,
and they'll be bearing the cost of that.
Yeah.
That's the number from the CRP. We'll probably have some level of capital involvement to tie in whatever we're doing to whatever they're doing. But that's totally unknown right now, but that's that project in totality. Just want people to know that that project in totality may cost about that much again, so when we're thinking about making decisions. My fear is that we roll up to those numbers and someone's like, well, we never knew that this was even a possibility. I
Mhm.
would rather be
Yeah,
overly transparent and say, hey, good news, it's only $20 million from our contribution, not 120. And we're still gonna get something that's gonna help us be resilient in that critical area, so, again, we're trying to. I'd say overly project that number
right.
and. For what it's worth, but,
Well, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
no worries.
Mhm.
And again, if people have questions, you guys go through, I know you guys haven't started your official Rory process yet. People have questions about that.
Well, we won't do ours anyway, probably till the end. I mean, I don't recommend people do them until they've listened to everybody, but you can.
But again, we're always open for questions and yeah, feel free to give us a call or stop by and we're happy to answer, but,
Thank you.
so
do you want to start with the wastewater treatment facility? I'm just looking at my list and I don't know if it's. the
Sure.
same sheet, But
yep, I'll just run through. So we have three categories. I'll try to go through them pretty fluidly. So we have coastal resiliency plan categories, hazard mitigation plan categories,
Yeah.
and then just natural resources ones, which are kind of a blend of, and maybe both of those and some other aspects that are put together and some other things that go on. It's kind of our catch-all when we're in more than one category. So, that 750 for the wastewater treatment facility resiliency.
how did that come together?
So that came together, that was an objective from the CRP, but we also have seen. In real time and from some data collection, a little bit of. Acceleration and erosion that's beginning to encroach on the wastewater treatment plant and the beds that are there. We've been working with David to start to look at what kind of resilient options we have, because it's a location where we simply can't like retreat the wastewater treatment facilities. It is where it is and it is not. So, to try to get ahead of that and start what that's gonna be. Kind of based on what we were doing for the downtown flood barrier in Washington Street, we get a pretty good handle on what those costs are. And I think to get to 30% design, we'll get something that we can get in front of, the public and the select board that we know will meet the protection needs that are there, but to also have that public process for people to understand what's gonna be involved with that. What may make that area look different, right? That section of beach shockingly is somewhat popular at times. And anything that changes down there, people are gonna be interested to know.
Well,
So,
everybody walks it, right?
yeah, I mean, there's lots of people there, but it's something again where we can't be tardy to that project, probably more than almost any. And this is to get that underway.
So who approached who? I'm just asking.
So,
because
When we developed the CRP, the first thing that was done, and wisely so, they did a island-wide risk assessment. And identified vulnerable areas to either, coastal flooding, erosion, combination of both, other coastal hazards. This was an area that scored high for that vulnerability, so. When they prioritized the CRP objectives, both through crack and then through the town. This was one that was really flagged as number 2 behind the Easy Street area.
Hmm.
And that's why this is kind of the second big project to come out of the coastal resilience.
And this is just design money.
Correct.
And it's also further supported by a lot of historic data for erosion in the area. And then in the fall of 2021, we started a shoreline monitoring program. This was the second site where we put down markers to start measuring shoreline retreat rates and look at how particularly storm impacts are changing the shape of this area where the coastal bank is in retreat. And I hate to say it out loud, but facts are facts. There was one storm where one of our marker locations in front of a sewer bed lost 60 feet in 1 minute.
Yeah, so it's.
Hmm.
It's a high priority. Again, that's something that we do all that data collection in-house. And have kind of enhanced that capability by doing it via GPS and being able to plot that, so. We can get pretty reliable data pretty fast, and that allows us to. Save a little bit of money on surveying and kind of track those long-term trends, so we can kind of look at it, those erosion rates, both in the short term, and then the state has erosion data that goes back into the 1800s. 1844. You can track that forward, so you can kind of compare that long-term rate with the short-term rate. To hopefully better approximate that, and then you can add in kind of your sea level rise modeling and. Get kind of a guesstimate on time. Again, this is, one of those facilities that behind the main transportation corridor is kind of top of the list.
We've also looked at the numbers over time, and one of the regrettable things for this particular South Shore location is normally you see erosion rates, and they're relatively linear. In the last handful of years, it's changed from linear to exponential. So we're seeing a real time problem and identifying it as a real time problem for a very high requirement for action.
Christie?
Oh, no. I know that like around the Fisherman's and Nobodier area, it will erode quickly and then accrete again. Is that happening in front of the sewer beds at all, or are we just seeing pretty much
Sure.
steady erosion there?
So erosion cycling happens where you'll see that we're during those storm events is you'll see that. What's kind of happening is you see the shoreline retreat in and the beach physically steepens. And then as that wave energy dissipates, is you'll see a build out in kind of the short term. But what we're seeing long term is that end point where you're seeing at the end of the storm is moving inland. And that's the erosion that's concerning, right? You're always gonna have that ebb and flow, whether it's, just regular summer, winter, beach kind of situations. But the long-term trend for how that coastal bank or coastal dune is moving is the part that's most concerning. You kind of expect that day to day, back and forth.
This is a little bit stable, this is not so stable, right? I mean, you can take bigger bites out of this than this,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and what happened, right, is. Not to get into like erosion class today, but
Field trip.
though,
And
anytime.
for field trip.
What,
We did.
And the way we kind of explain it, and we explain to school groups and things, right, is. When you think about the ocean and how it's working, right, the summer when we all go to the beach. Outside of like storms, you get these nice like waves that kind of gently lap up to the beach, but all those waves are always carrying sand. Whether it's from the beach, the ocean floor, there's a certain percentage of sand in all of those. But when those hit and they move slowly, that sand has a longer time to drop out. And you get these long, wide, really flat beaches. In the winter, I mean, we're all here in the winter, so we've seen it, you get these big energetic waves that turn. And what happens is the volume of the beach doesn't substantially change that much. But what happens is instead of being that nice flat beach that sticks out, is the beach steepens. So that volume packs against it because that energy is coming and taking more. But then also when it's hitting and depositing, sometimes you can get that, but what happens is it steepens up and it moves inward. And when it gets that way, like you said, you hit that angle that's not good. If you get big storms or storms in succession, is you lose that original parent bank because there's nowhere else for that energy to go. So it takes it and drags it out. And one of the ways that it's weird to think of it this way, but one of the ways that beach can protect itself from eroding is honestly creating friction in the water by putting sand out into the water. So like if you go out to, to Sankaty or even the South Shore in the winter when those big storms, you see those huge, big brown swaths of sand that's out in that water. But all of that sand that's in there is also creating friction for that water, so. It's kind of self-sustaining in that way, but if you start to lose material or that doesn't go in. You can start to see those greater erosion events, or if you see steepening, you can see those greater erosion events. But it's also why we typically don't see huge erosion events in the summer, because the beach is much flatter, so you have that long.
Oh, I do have a question. I was wondering about, we went out there a few years ago and it was really pretty good to see, that corner is getting pretty close and even when we were there, so I recommend checking it out, but at what point? And I know kind of this year seems like there's a hybrid. David's looking at maybe not using that area and kind of moving one of those pools to sort of the other land on the site.
Yeah.
At what point, and I don't know where it would come from, do we make recommendations that say, based on what we're seeing with erosion, what point do we relocate? And
I think that's-
and call it while it's stable to do it and not under a condition where it's and I know this goes into the big picture and I know we probably have a bunch of projects related to this, and so I just was curious to know what, how does it work? Do we give David guidance, or is David really running on his own sort of, or I know it's probably a group effort, but
If I might
What's-
have a
what's-
partial answer.
just a few little.
So when we were
different
looking at the risk assessment and the development of the CRP, like Jeff was telling you about a few minutes ago, we were looking at recent investment in areas such as the sewer treatment plant and all the upgrades that happened there in kind of like 2010 to 2014, that kind of time frame. And a lot of money recently went in there for lots of upgrades and to expand the facilities. And then it has, say, for the sake of argument, I think it was a 50-year lifespan for that entire facility. And that represented an extraordinarily major investment at the time. Then if we were to recreate that in $2025 somewhere else, it's extraordinarily expensive.
Yeah.
So in terms of a cost benefit analysis, a resilience project on the ocean side or a combination of resilience and partial retreat, where possible, that is far cheaper than a brand new construction and rerouting all of the infrastructure that goes from the entire town area all the way down. You'd have to redo effectively all of the CMOM project, all of the forced sewer mains. It's not just one thing, the physical site itself, it's all of the infrastructure that leads to it.
Yeah.
So, you'd have to get all the pumping stations reorganized, and then it would fail hard in terms of the cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
this
it
is
makes
kind
sense.
of,
Yeah, I remember that.
the
Yeah.
interim and the cheaper solution while you develop your decades plan for that one particular site, but this would get you those decades to plan for that.
Yeah.
Do you?
I will make just a comment on which I'll mention when David's here. It wouldn't be a bad idea to not do that all at once and start planning in the next 5 years. Of just gathering the site. I don't know if they've already had a site, but kind of slowly starting to sort of put together that thing. I'm just thinking about the future, you say 60 feet were taken out in one night, so. I think it would be palatable for the public to plan ahead. Even if we're 25 years out or 30 years out.
Yeah.
And just start a slow process of not dismantling what we've invested in, but maybe start recreating in a small way, a new location.
The one thing I'll add just for
Yeah.
color is that I do think they physically see that, and I think the public would actually be okay with there being a plan like that.
Just
Because they know,
something.
they do know it. This is not an issue where people are pretty like naive or they don't know about it. They do know about that.
Yeah, and people like to flush their toilets, so that's, that's something that, it's the one spot where people are never gonna really argue, because it's.
I'm not proposing a whole new one. I'm just saying,
just
start
saying,
the
like-
process, the infrastructure of that, even if it's it could be a 20-year project, but.
Right.
But when the time comes, when we really need it, it's there and it was palatable.
So it's funny because David's actually done a pretty good job with this, and the new Force Main project has a little of this built in, and it's something that we've really started to talk about where
Cool.
we look at, you know, when we're designing areas or even, you know, new pump stations or where we're selectively putting in, you know, cutoff valves and things that are there, that's a real part of that conversation.
Yeah,
To say
good.
like, hey, if we need to reroute,
Is this a good spot?
is this a good spot?
Yeah.
One, or two, should we size that pump? Because if we need to pump it somewhere else,
Mhm.
we may need some
Yeah.
more capacity.
Yeah.
And as we're building this pump system, we may not be putting the pump that we need in, but we have space for it when we need to go in, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's good.
Yeah,
So in terms of the proposal here, it's the kind of thing that would probably form part of an alternatives analysis within this 30% design.
Mm.
So you would undertake an alternatives analysis to see what the possibilities are.
Yeah,
so in terms of this ask, is what are you getting in return for this investment? I mean, what are you physically getting?
you get it from this is you're probably getting, you know, some sort of conceptualization to the point that you could bring it to the public and select board for deciding what people would like to see and put costings to and what people are willing to pay for
Mhm.
to get an effective result.
But what are we gonna see? Is this like, what? Like, what are they gonna recommend in this design?
Well, that's the,
But we don't have any idea, they're gonna recommend
We do.
hard armoring or what, like,
we've looked at a few different options, kind of high level, with one firm that David has worked with for years, just to see what are the options. Can we do some waterfront plantings, some natural plantings? Can we do a combination of natural with a hard core underneath of it for the hard stop? Should we go for they're the kind of green infrastructure, the kind of more simplistic methods, the ones that are more permittable? Do you go for the full on hard armoring? And I'm not going to say
I know.
the Sconset word, but
I know, but no,
That's a
that's what I'm
possibility.
asking,
Yeah.
like, I'm
Right,
trying to
we don't
prepare
know. It's the
people like
gambit.
mentally.
I think
with you.
from our end, looking at concepts there, right? I think options that are the least intrusive are preferred on face value, just for palatable, but I also think, and I think. I don't think we're gonna talk about this project today, but looking at what we've done at Sackagee where you're saying. We're gonna put in a steel bulkhead to protect that roadway, and then we're gonna put a piece of green infrastructure in front of it. So you don't have to see that bulkhead, right? And we're still gonna provide those ecosystem services that a natural bank would have. So I would anticipate something for the wastewater treatment facility being some level of hybrid system depending upon. Where and what you needed, but we also don't wanna, you know.
Mm.
Cut your nose off to spite your face and all of a sudden create something where you're playing chase the end for forever. You know, there needs to be a way to get away where you're not gonna put it off onto neighbors. Or, you know, God forbid in that area too, if you push it too far down. And you speed up erosion at the airport inadvertently, and then all of a sudden you've created a secondary problem that you didn't want to deal with. Or that someone else is gonna have to deal with. But I think as far as concepts go, I don't think there's a limit to what would be there. I would anticipate a project like this presenting a real hard option just for people to see.
Yeah,
And then some of the other ones, just because I think people need to see what that would be and what that cost would be to also help explain some of the other options. Thank you.
Christine,
actually, Kelly, no, I don't have a question there.
I'm just wondering, I'm assuming that the design people who David's worked with, that they have an engineering aspect to it, so that when they're thinking about design, they're also thinking about the potential for it to affect the airport or other.
Yeah.
They're wrapped into the design.
So those are also requirements as you get into permitting too, especially through like the Wetlands Protection Act, I think, so. You have to kind of contemplate that.
But it is considered in the design, at this stage, the higher level design.
Oh, absolutely. Right, and that comes into like if you need to do, you know, some sort of nourishment or enhancement or
Mhm.
putting sand back or how you do that, or how you even. You know, taper out that structure or return it back to try to mitigate some of those things.
Mhm.
I think it would be incumbent upon anyone to be sure that they had that covered in any sort of design.
right? Oh, Christine,
Could you explain the funding in the way of like, we're doing, like, natural resources is doing this, for, for David's department. Like, is it because we're talking, we're not on his property, we're on sort of like beach property? Like, this is clearly a project for them.
Yeah.
Like, everything we're doing is mitigating the impact to them. So,
has experience with
Right.
yeah, I
Those-
was curious on how that funding works and is it, and I guess it's.
For all of these projects, and we've kind of transitioned to this model at Easy Street's gone this way a little bit too, where. We initiate kind of the project for these adaptation projects as kind of the subject matter experts, right? So we're the ones that are dealing with erosion, we're doing the monitoring and those things. But David has to fully participate because there are certain needs and restrictions that. For things that can happen or can't happen.
Yeah.
As part of his operation, also something that he, figuring out how construction integrates with his operation, but David also has a, wastewater treatment facility to keep up and running on the daily
Yeah.
basis too, so. For these, especially early in design, we usually are the ones that kind of coordinate and have those regular meetings. Sometimes they're monthly, sometimes is the project's a little busier, they'll be more often, sometimes less to let engineers work. But we kind of act as the hub of the wheel and bring those folks in. And then one of the things we've been talking a lot about lately is. Once we get through that early design phase or we get into permitting, at some point it transitions from. A planning and permitting effort to the physical construction effort. And that physical construction effort is something that's probably, in that case, at David's facility. Better managed by David, so he would take that more leadership role.
Yep.
And we would provide that supplemental help, or if there's, environmental monitoring that's required, or. Kind of evaluations, or if there's grant funding that needs reporting, that's stuff that we would typically assist with. But the physical construction and sequencing and timing for that, David would probably work with whatever. Project of the size would probably have an OPM too, I would imagine, so whoever's doing that work to kind of coordinate that. And it would be the same, right, if we were doing a roadway project, it would probably transition to like Drew with DPW, because they're the ones that. Install and maintain those roads, so we kind of shepherd it to a point. And then we leave the middle, go out to the side, and they take over that middle, but it allows them to do what they need to do. And get something that they're ready to go, but they're an integral part of the process.
Well, it's good to
Yes,
see y'all working together.
You guys have the data. Yeah,
Oh,
makes
yes,
sense.
and in terms of how the project may run in terms of land ownership, this is a really interesting site because obviously the sewer department has their fenced area. And outside of that, on the western side is a boundary with some land bank property that we wouldn't want to have a negative impact on. But once you start going west, there's an awful lot of large town parcels. What that also means is, when we're doing project management, say for the Easy Street project or for Washington Street, there's a lot of neighbours that need a lot of consultations. In this area, we would also have to consult all of the neighbours, but the distances are very much larger. So it's lesser impact on those neighbours. We just want to make sure everyone gets access, everyone gets to use the beach that remains in place post-construction. But this would be one of those projects that might go a little bit more smoothly because of the large ownership that's all within the town's hands.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
Should we jump to HMP?
Sure, so the HMP one,
Thank you, guys, that's
no problem,
super helpful.
we can probably go on for hours just about that project,
It is.
but
Experience.
sort of-
It is, it's really neat to watch you all work together too.
Yes, it is.
See how you all bring your different areas of expertise.
Sometimes there's some bright faces, and some difficult things, but we try to keep that to it. But those two together, kind of the Manicat Long Pond hardening. Sue and I talked about this quite a bit. And we had talked about moving this off to FY 28, and I said, for the first meeting. Let's leave it in 27, because I wanted to give a 2-minute explanation of why. So we've applied for a grant, and this project, the Manicat Long Pond hardening. It really boils down to, it's the culvert sizing and replacement projects for the 2 culverts that connect. In the one case, the north head of Long Pond to Long Pond, where everyone likes to, go turtle fish in the little piers there.
I love that.
And then the next,
There.
and then the next one down is where the Manicat ditch connects. Hither Creek and Mattocket Harbor to Long Pond. Those two are constricted and have some issues for flooding and flood relief. The tricky part with that project, obviously, is there's a lot of moving parts. If we're gonna be doing road work on Mattocket Road, there's concerns for flooding in other parts of the road. There's been talk for years and about the potential for, sewer going out to Mattocket and what that may or may not look like. And I think the last thing that we want to do is start down the path and do a project where if those convert from a culvert to a little bridge or resize culverts and do a bunch of road work. For someone to be like, well, we're gonna put sewer through there 2 years later, let's rip it up and do it now what we're interested in doing. But we do have a lot of legwork to do regarding the actual flow and those water connections. There's some, some fisheries issues. There's some water quality issues, and some water quality concerns. So we've applied for a grant to hopefully do that, which may offset this cost entirely for this project specific. But I think we also are trying to move through the two larger priorities of Easy Street and the sewer beds before we really start to tackle Madigan Road altogether. But wanted to leave it in there just so again, people stay cognizant of it.
What kind, I mean, you wouldn't have to shut down access on the road to do anything, you would all be kind of more on that perimeter, is that what you're saying?
So I think for doing our work for those two spots, we wouldn't be doing, roadway construction right yet. So everything that was going on as far as properly sizing and designing those culvert replacements could take place. I know when we've talked about whether it's, box culvert, causeway, similar culvert to what's there, we would probably try to do it in a manner where there was at least one lane of travel, because it's the only way to get out there. So that's
It practically is one lane of travel now,
it would be there.
What
I mean,
is
that's the logistical problem of
It's huge.
Mattocket Road. So it's there. I mean, we've looked at, and we've talked a lot about even like, do we need to temporarily improve going down like Barrett Farm and coming across Massasoit Bridge? But if you're a large truck, you can't do that because the bridge can't hold you. So, right, like all of these things are in play, and we obviously, don't want to send 80 million cars down a dirt road and a bridge that's not designed to handle that level of traffic. But that's gonna be the trick, right? It's gonna be the same thing that we see at Folgers Marsh by the Life Saving Museum, is how we're gonna replace that culvert system and
Yeah.
enhance that for flooding protection. Excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
And construction sequencing for that, for what that's gonna be. And, people much smarter than me that understand that stuff are gonna have to figure out how to be able to maintain at least some level of access to get through, cause I don't think even for like emergency purposes, you could say, well, if you live out Winnet, the fire truck or ambulance is gonna have to go all the way down Milestone and circle back through Pulpus. Go that direction, it's just not gonna work, so you're gonna have to figure that out.
Yeah.
That's just a sequencing and construction methodology question, but I think that's overcomable.
One of the interesting things about Mattocket Road and the 2 points at Long Pond that were identified in the HMP is if either of them go, or if there's any issue where they're both lost, you've already kind of identified it. There's a permanent resident community beyond both of those little culverts that would ultimately be isolated. So that whole community, all the Mattocket area, has this massive isolation risk. So the culverts themselves are in pretty not great shape, but no, they need work, hence the point of this. But what we need to also make sure we can do is have flowing water that gets under those bridges, or if they end up becoming bridges or enhanced culverts, so that we can make sure that we do not have an isolation risk for something in the, I think there's 500 people, or is it 500 homes, I can't remember which, that are permanent year-round residents on the beyond Second Bridge.
Yeah.
It's also something that came up in the post resilience plan, and it was identified independently there, but this remains a HMP priority.
Okay, but we're gonna look at it next year.
I think so, but again, we originally had it in there, I'd like to at least give an explanation for why things are moving,
Yeah.
especially this close to the meeting. So we'll probably go ahead and at least put it to FY 28. If we do get that grant though, we'll probably start that sooner, but that's on someone else's dime, and that's always the best news.
And,
Yeah.
right, sorry, I didn't hear about the grant. That was
So
coming
we
from
applied
the
through,
state?
through a state grant for doing that project.
Is that federal money or state money?
It is state money. That
Okay.
is like the hot topic of all grants.
Oh, I'm sure that's all, that's the only question I'm gonna ask,
So-
like all fall. Is it state money or federal money?
The state has a really good, kind of culvert replacement grant program that they've had for years and years, and it's kind of through part of that, so. We were asked by town admin and finance that any grant that was active or any grant that we were applying for. To be extra sure of the funding sources
Because it's
for
into
all of
the
those.
state.
Some of it too, because there's fluid requirements coming from.
Yeah.
The federal government right now for what you can and cannot be doing, so it's.
Yeah.
A little extra tricky.
Yeah.
But we'll figure it out at some point, so
Yeah,
we'll get there. All right, so those are those two.
thank you.
I'll try to power through. Some of these those are probably the two most complicated, so hopefully the rest of these won't be too crazy. The first one there, that admin 23005,
Mhm.
that's the
You ask
annual
it every year.
appropriation for coastal resiliency.
And is that ever gonna go into the budget as a regular line item, so it's not, or it's always gonna be asked for?
That is a hot topic of debate. There are a few of us that think that should just go in to the budget. There's a few things that we do that have gone through capital historically that we think should just be in the budget. And
Yeah, like the baseline data.
baseline data,
Yeah.
we think should just be in the budget, and that one you'll see in there again. Because without those, we're kind of, what are we doing? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, does it, but I mean, you know, when you say that goes into baseline, you're earmarking it straight to a project, whereas. I'm guessing that this offers you guys a little flexibility to have it to move around. When you need and when things pop up or there's something that happens is that the case? Like, would
Yeah,
it
so-
give you, well,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The coastal resiliency money, the way it works, and I think it would actually work the same whether it came as a capital appropriation or through just a, line item through the
Mhm.
general fund, is it offers a number of things. One is we do have projects that are, year to year projects that maybe aren't, big capital projects in the sense where we're coming to do like design and construction, all those things. Like I think a good example of one that's happening right now is we are working on the island-wide strategic retreat relocation plan. And that's a project identified in the CRP that didn't come to capital because it's, here to say it this way. It's only a few $100,000 to get what we're looking for to homeowners to be able to plan and effectively plan for how to best adapt their properties, move and do things and do it consistent with the town and have kind of set standards and to do all of that. That falls within that coastal resiliency money. We also have been known to use some of that coastal resiliency money as we'll flag it for a time to use for. Leveraging grant matches and things like that, where we can say, we have money aside. You're asking for a 10 to 20% match on this grant. We can go in and say, we're gonna ask for a $2 million grant. If we can say, because we have this money, we have $200,000 that we can put in towards a match to accomplish a much bigger project. And offset that cost to someone else.
And the other thing it does is it turns it into a multiplier, a force multiplier, applier of sorts, whereby if it's, again, like Jeff was saying, if $1 million grant and we have our portion, we can suddenly only pay our portion of, say, if it's 20%, 200,000, and we're getting 800,000
Right.
because we had the seed match.
yeah.
That has been huge.
So is that as easy to do with it here as it is if it was just in your budget?
So. I think the tricky part, right, and this gets into how,
And I do like I do like the optics of the funding, and for the community to sort of, I think it's a little more visible in this place, but,
Mhm. That is true.
I personally like it here also because general fund appropriations have that fiscal year life cycle. And sometimes for whatever reason, those delays come in where we're spanning fiscal years on those funds and having the flexibility of the capital appropriation, and once it's appropriated and put through, you get a little bit of flexibility fiscal year to fiscal year can be helpful. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I like it here too, because I think it gives it an extra degree of oversight before it gets, it's a lot of money. Year to year, right? It's $1 million a year and it's gone up and down a little bit, but it's also something where you guys have a look at it and see what's going on. You know, FinCom still does, town admin still does, town meeting still does. Is one, I think it holds our feet to the fire as the manager of those funds to be sure that we're using them and using them effectively. But it also puts a lot of extra eyes to it. So what we're trying to do stays relevant. So when we come in with a project for, let's pick the one, let's go wastewater treatment, dune restoration, $38 million. We know all of the steps that got us to that point, which for us is super helpful.
yeah, I mean, other than what these projects are, because I'm on the PrAC committee.
From-
There is pages and pages of projects that are coastal resilience related, like a lot. Staff is very busy all the time. So, yeah.
But one of the reasons I don't mind if it's here, but I do think it's not telling people what it is, so it's a little out of place for me, because capital projects are usually like, it's that project, that's what you're spending that money.
Yeah.
This is kind of like, hey, give me $1 million and I'll tell you later. It just is, and I know that you have ideas and plans, I know. But that's the only thing I don't like about it, it just seems a little out of place, but in that, like, the accounting for the $1 million every year, like, how can we follow up on that? Like, what
So-
you,
We
Use
keep that,
that.
if you guys want, as you guys move through, Leah Hill in our office does a really good job of tracking that, and she does that, coordinates with Sue.
Yeah.
And those folks, we can certainly give you I don't think we need to give you like an invoice by invoice breakdown if you guys don't wanna say, but we could certainly be like, this $1 million went to like these 3 projects and this would happen, that's something that we could certainly send you guys.
I think sometimes it just doesn't like add up, because if you listen to the select board, like, Matt Fee loves to talk about having a slush fund for a rainy day, and so that kind of implies that's what this is, but it's not. I mean, this is actually, you're deploying this money
Working
now.
money.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, it's a ticket.
so I kind of would like those to get sort of, you know what I mean? Like a little reconcile.
We'll put together kind of a list of where we are and what's happening.
Yeah, she meant, by the way, she mentioned last night, I did watch her on she mentioned the environmental justice program that we had.
Yes,
Yes.
And I did want to ask you about that at some point in the.
Sure.
What was
Well,
going on with that, 'cause
we'll
I
knock
thought that was gonna talk about little parks and recreation, and I was kind of excited about that.
There's a lot of different elements to the environmental justice. I can cover that once we're done with these if you wish.
Excellent, that was jogging my memory that she talked about last
Yep.
night, and I was like, oh, we saw that capital.
it's kind of ever present in things that we do know. It's the.
Oh, great, well, maybe it'll get its own line item then next
So-
year.
Alright. So just real quickly, so I'll skip the the baseline data, environmental data collection, so we just kind of touch on that.
Yep.
The next one, we've put in for $2 million, you guys approved a couple years ago.
A lot, it was $4 million up 2 years ago, wasn't it?
No.
No, that was for my account pond, that's a separate project, and we just finished permitting for that. And that is in procurement right now for doing that physical work and dredging that whole pond. It'll be incredible. It's the first time it'll be done in the Commonwealth for the
Maybe
purpose.
you're gonna try to be posting photos for that.
Well, we gotta start doing work there first, then we'll start.
No, I'm just saying, I think it'd be super interesting.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, but this dredging, we came in a few years ago and we did a
10-year budget.
10-year dredge plan capital project that we're getting close. So we did a, total like bathymetry of the harbor, flow modeling, sediment modeling. We call it our sediment transport and dredge plan. That's about to finish. And there's identified dredge spots that need to be dredged. Some of them include like Easy Street Basin, entrance to Pulpus Harbor. There's a couple spots up further harbor.
So we've started ranking them And the two highest priority are the entrance to Pulpus Harbour and the area in Hither Creek. Almost all of Hither Creek, almost from Matticat Marine down through F Street boat ramp around to, it's called Jackson's Point boat ramp, and up into the harbour a little bit towards the tip of Jackson's Point. It's a substantial area. They're the two highest priorities, the ones that need to get done, the ones where at low tide there's access issues as it is. Then other areas that Jeff has already mentioned, Children's Beach, Easy Street area, around the boat basin on the exterior, not within the boat basin, because that's not something we can deal with. And then the access to going up to Great Harbour Yacht Club. There's
That channel.
and that channel that
It's
goes up
hilarious
there.
around the town pier.
The town pier is a big one that we need to be able to get to. Then going up harbour, we've identified a number of points, particularly going around to the tip of Pocomo Point, where I think is at Fourth Point and Bass Point out the side of that, where we're looking at maybe instead of having to have a big, huge S curve, which is still fine, but even at low tide, there's a couple of spots there that are not navigable or very difficult to navigate, turn it into an actual marked navigation channel with a correctly sized cut. So that will also not impact eelgrass areas, not impact shell fisheries. So we have to be very precise in what we're working with. Then we're modeling this after something that's already been done for Edgartown over Martha's Vineyard. They have a 10-year dredge plan with all of the correct 401 water quality permits, all of the correct Army Corps of Engineer permits. We're following the methods laid out by them, and so it's much easier for us. We also have another interesting scenario that we're trying to understand. Once we have material dredged, where does it go and what happens to it? It happens to be a small local fact that the price of sand is astronomically high here. So there's actually a potential that we can use this sand instead of having to buy sand for beach nourishment projects within the CRP. We can use our own local sand for these projects. If there's any excess, it becomes a saleable item.
That's great.
So this $2 million, long story short, is
To get it done.
to start operations and start dredging. That's really what it is, because our fear with all of these, right, is you get all these plans and things get underway. And then you finish, you haven't put the forethought in to be like, well, we need to start doing the physical work. And then it sits a year, and then all of a sudden you've fallen down and you just never get back to it, and you've spent, $500,000 to create a plan and get permits to do nothing. Dredging is something that here is something that we need to do, and I think we'll probably get into a program to some degree where we'll probably be doing for the next 10 years some level of annual dredging in the off season to kind of knock through all of these in that 10-year cycle.
Do we need to be buying other equipment
So the way that it
to
has,
aid that?
we're looking at that too. At the moment, we're looking at, because of time of year restrictions, we'd only have maybe 4-ish months in the year from October to December where we can dredge. Maybe into January a little bit. So we don't know the answer to your question just yet. But at the moment, we think it still makes sense to continue as we have to continue to book time in the Barnstable County Dredge and other dredges. And there's a Plymouth Town Dredge as well that we've
And
previously
there's
used,
private companies that do the tip.
private companies. But at the moment, we don't know that it's worth it because you can't do year-round dredging. There's time of year restrictions. For say winter flounder, a protected fish species, a state listed protected fish species. There's time of year restrictions for how you can do things to bring sand on land. Then we just don't want to run afoul of that. So we have a lot of dredging to do. And when you get into a dredging project, it goes pretty quick. The dredges can run for many hours with different crews that are brought in. But if we had our own dredge, we could train them up, but can we keep people going year round? I don't know yet.
Or
Sounds like you can. You guys have gotten a lot of capital from dredging in the last few years. It wasn't just my comment. There was another pond that we approved, didn't we?
my comment's the only one we've done dredging for.
Oh, I thought that we talked about.
Harbor Master came in and did some dredging a number of years ago. Charlie was probably here, deputy chief, to do some dredging, but we've kind of moved
There's another one.
into dredging because of the beneficial reuse aspect of reusing that sand, so.
Okay.
Something that we've got into, so that's that one.
Well, and just before we do move on from that one, I should also say, and I hate to say this out loud, it's the quiet part you shouldn't say out loud sometimes. We haven't done quite enough dredging, so we're actually quite decently behind in some of the navigation channels we're in and get in trouble if we don't get on with it. Yeah, so
That's the
just,
funding for the next 2 years or so?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm,
gotcha.
mhm.
Right, and some of
But
those,
she's gotta come in for her own money for that.
Sheila?
Is that what you're
Or
saying?
No.
No, no, no.
we're gonna be coordinating all
You
of
will
it
coordinate with
together.
her for that. Okay.
So she's been part of the dredge plan and helping to do that prioritization. To help
Okay.
identify
I
those
see.
areas for navigation.
I got
so-
you. I was gonna say, is she just doing the harbor or something?
Okay.
Okay.
So the next one down is another kind of long-standing project. It's not necessarily as CRP related, it's more of a stormwater coastal flooding project. Is we've been looking at doing something with the area on the corner of Holbert Avenue and Easton Street, the big grass field that's there. To kind of kick the tires on doing something to help with the stormwater that accumulates there, the huge puddles that are in the road. Kind of modeling after what the land bank has done further up the road on Water Street to do something that we can kind of create an interactive park that also handles water. So the FY 27 request is 150,000 for design. That number comes pretty much directly from the square foot cost for design for the land banks project further up the road. Sized up a little bit because it's a little bit different area. And then with kind of the inflation factor put on it, just because that project's a few years older. And then in 28 is the construction portion of, we estimated that kind of based on the same, but that's essentially to hopefully help with stormwater in that area where we've seen stormwater issues and gotten a fair amount of Brand Point Association comments about trying to do something with it, but to still kind of keep a park space that's there.
Well, so why did that? Sorry, Chris, you go first.
No, I was just say, where exactly is the,
So if you go down and you're
That
like you're headed to the Coast Guard station towards
Yeah.
Brand Point. Right before you take that left on the Holbert Avenue,
Yeah.
there's the big grass triangle that's there.
Yeah.
It's that section.
That'd be really pretty. How did you identify that first, like as a priority?
in two ways. It first came from the CRP as identified as a critical flooding area, particularly in winter and storm events. And then secondarily to that, the Brand Point Homeowners Association, the neighborhood group, they approached us and really said that they wanted to see something done here. People had all kinds of local issues with some of the houses surrounding there, even access issues, not being able to get there. This would be the kind of thing that would potentially alleviate some of those issues, cause the road to drive faster so that the road is usable longer. The Homeowners Association are very keen on this. There's not something I can suggest out loud, but they offered some assistance. Not something we can take up.
Yeah,
just yet.
no, I know, but it's out there.
It's out there as an, yeah.
Yep.
Well, when I see $850,000 to do it the next year, I'm kind of alarmed, but did the land bank, did they meet the land bank too about it and?
So the land bank did it on their property, and this parcel that we're talking about here on the corner of Easton and Hulbert, that's a town parcel. So yes, the land bank did it on their site independently. They gave me some of the documents for the planning purposes and the costings that they had accrued from that project. I don't know, and I didn't see in any materials I was given if they worked with the homeowners association or not. I'd like to think they did, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn?
As someone who's on the BPA board, I'm unaware of any of this.
I can give you more information. There was even, I hate to go into fine detail, a neighbor who would like to see very particular things, even benches, and they'd even given suggestions for names they'd like to see on those benches.
Hey, I'm part of that naming competition too. I love stuff.
Yeah. Well,
At this location?
yes.
May I ask about, so I know drainage is a really big issue down there and I've attended some crack meetings where you guys were in February, I think, the last one you guys were talking about that area. What are, just design aside, what needs to happen in that area to help the health of the harbor, the flooding issues and, in light of the houses that stand between that area and.
So this is one of these things, to be able to control flooding in the medium to long term. Long term in the CRP, there's much larger plans, but this is one of those things that gives relief in the time before we need to get to a grander project for that whole area. If you have a look at the rain garden that's further up at on the corner of Easton and is it Southwater?
North Beach.
North Beach, thank you. That is what the way they constructed that was extremely clever. They had some wetland issues in that site already, and they basically incorporated that into the design. They were able to create these kind of ponding and pooling areas for water to flow down, accumulate, filter in kind of reed bed systems, in kind of a native grassland and kind of almost like we're saying it the wrong way, kind of a swampy type habitat, but more manicured and more maintained. They had they have kind of like a stone table and stepping stones and everything built in such a way that it creates its own runoff and own absorption area. So we will be looking at something similar, not identical, but something quite similar. It would end up looking about the same.
And if we were to leave it looking as it has historically looked, right as now, and we were to incorporate or engineer ways for it to be, because it was once a wetland, that whole area, I mean, the
Yeah.
entirety of that point
Yeah,
was a
as a-
wetland, and it was filled in around 1900 to build those houses. So it's trying to be what it is. And is there a way to do that without changing its historical view or adding the
Yeah.
cost of?
So the
Design.
NCF wetland that's next door
Yeah.
is the main wetland in the area.
Mm.
And that is where the former swale was. And swales are kind of like high tide areas.
Mm.
Water get in there, but it got filled in. The connection got filled in. And the development happened. Now there's all this roadway and infrastructure under the road and telephone poles and hotels and many multi-million-dollar mansions and large accommodations and even our Coast Guard station and our hatchery down at the end of that road. So we need to be able to maintain the road as it is. We know that it once was previously a swale. It might want to be a wetland of some description again, but we can use that and enhance that area back into a wetland and kind of give nature that bump along that, we encourage it back to wetland habitat, but wetland habitat that's useful to the needs of the area, not just entirely natural. This is a constructed, man-made rain garden type situation that does the same ecosystem service as what it would like to be.
I'm wondering, since I'm interested in the historical view and keeping it the landscape as it is, it has been for 100 years since all that infrastructure was put there. Is there a way to accomplish the task without changing the appearance of it so that it isn't like the fancy rain garden, the land bank down the road, which is very pretty, but it would totally change a significant part of Grand Point. So is there a way to do
Do
it?
you
without
not think that, you think the triangle looks good?
I think it looks beautiful.
So
Really?
it's a lawn area that's mown by the DPW at the moment.
It's been that way ever
And-
since
yeah.
I was a little kid,
And
and it's
when-
part of the point.
Yeah, if you want to do that, and keep it as a lawn area, one of the problems is we don't have the percolation rate. You need water to soak down into the ground. We don't have the percolation because it's all silted up, sanded in, and it's almost impermeable. Water stands there and pools there and floods onto the road there. That's the issue.
Yeah.
What you have to do in constructed rain gardens a lot of the time is you have to dig down, put in larger, coarser material that then gives you the percolation to send water down to groundwater.
Mhm.
Then however it looks on top, if you replant grass on that, it'll silt back in, and whatever infrastructure you've put underneath,
Mhm.
it won't last.
Well,
For
I would say there's an easy answer to this,
Mhm.
is if we're able to get this funding, we can all participate in the design and scoping process for what that will be. Because we'll do that as a public process. There won't be something that we crawl into like the dark hole of natural resources office and come out and be like, build it
I
down.
do know, I'm on the fence either way. What I do know, because I have clients down there, is it does not drain.
that's the problem.
I
That's what
mean,
we're trying to
even,
figure out.
even when the tide goes down, that is, I mean, the marsh does its job, but it's, it's quite an impact.
Mhm.
Yeah, it definitely needs help.
I do think you're talking about, I don't think the rain garden in this are the same. I think same principle, but I think we're talking about a major, like, impact with inflow at this location than the rain garden, because my take on the rain garden is it was always very saturated ground and was never gonna be really that great and usable for much.
Yeah.
Whereas they have made it usable, but it doesn't have the impact of the high tides and
Yeah.
water inflow like the rain garden.
Yeah, and whatever is designed there, right, is if there's significant coastal flooding.
Yeah.
Right, if the no-name storm comes back again and you have a flood where there's 3 feet of water over the road, the rain garden is gonna flood just like everywhere else, right? It's just what it is,
Yeah.
but as far as, heavy rain events, or even what we're seeing now, kind of in that road at times, we're starting to see regular sunny day flooding from time to time, which is just big high tides coming up and dealing with that, is having somewhere to put that water where it can get away from impacting roadways and things like that is something that.
That's what it just follow. So you're not, so really what it is the water's gonna come. This is a way to mitigate just water, standing water, and having it to sort of manage the water after the fact that it's flooded.
Correct.
I'd be very impressed. I'm, still eager to listen about this, but I'd be impressed to see how that is a factor, but,
Well, maybe we need a little bit more information from the land.
yeah,
bank
much,
project.
much more, but I know, on the, down at Brand Point on the corner by, Halbert, I'd be impressed at the, if it was to in fact work and,
Oh.
and be effective. But I appreciate the fact that really, we're never gonna stop the inflow of the high tides and rain and floodwater, but, my thoughts about that whole area, as I said, has always been, it just never drains.
So,
And if this isn't a factor of sort of providing assistance to that component, then that's
yeah,
quite
and
good.
and I
That's quite
think,
good.
right, not in a vacuum, as we look at whatever strategy is gonna be had for long-term coastal protection for that whole neighborhood, right? That, just not to get like super nerdy about the numbers here, but that grass circle is, depending on where you're standing, is really at about elevation 3 to 4. If we have 100-year flood, like one of the big floods, they project that to be up to elevation 8. So it could be under 4 feet of water, right?
Right.
There's no infrastructure that we're
Yeah.
building or constructing
Yeah.
that's ever gonna handle that level
Sure.
of like, like we're building arcs and we're starting to collect animals, right? Like, that's what's happening. So,
Well, the houses kind of did do that,
right,
Jeff.
no, so you're seeing, right?
I mean, and that water's coming through those houses and coming
Yep.
further in.
So we're adapting houses, Brand Point probably more so than anywhere, we've seen houses go up and have flood panels and breakaway panels and
Yeah.
louvers and all those fun things that are there. And the roadways are there, but I know, part of the CRP also contemplates what we're doing for long-term protection, not just, on Easy Street, Washington Street where that is, but obviously for the Brand Point neighborhood too, because there's gonna come a point where if we take repetitive losses in that area, things like insurance are just not gonna become available because flood insurance does not look kindly on consistent repetitive loss properties anymore, and they've really started to crack down. So as we're integrating that, the one thing that we've really learned from Easy Street and Washington Street, right, is if we cut the water off from coming in, right? We also then have to deal with the water that historically, just during rain events, can still go back out.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
do we do with that? Where does it go? And that, the big marsh that the foundation owns definitely holds a lot of that. But there are areas where that's gonna have to pick up the slack and the extra, because as we build more impervious area, that water is gonna go somewhere. And rain generates an incredible amount of
Yeah.
water, even like the slightest amount.
Yeah.
Don't always think of it because you don't always see big puddles, but that area where you're at elevation 3 or 4, and your groundwater elevation is at like elevation 2, is there a real small pocket for any extra water to go?
Hmm.
And if that groundwater pushes up, and I can tell you for a fact that groundwater down there is tidally influenced too, so it goes up and down. If it goes up and you need to get a foot of water below the ground, there's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah.
So it goes out and over, and now there's, water in front of homes that makes homes maybe inaccessible. It's those things. So try to find little pockets to alleviate those. I know we've even looked at kind of similar projects down to help deal with that monstrosity of a puddle down at like Sandbar and Jetty's Beach for what's gonna happen there and where that water can go. Because ultimately we need to get that water back into groundwater so it can, one, recharge, but then also get off of the areas that we don't want impacted in a responsible way that doesn't always require engineered solutions that involve pumping and piping and doing things that are a pain to maintain, because nature is really good at taking care of itself. We just gotta let it do its thing sometimes. So, well, it's kind of helping along.
Caroline, go ahead.
I'm recalling, I don't know when, but there had been some sort of pipe that was over, that went between the wetland area and the harbor, and it went through maybe the Frisbee's house. It's not, there are no Frisbees anymore. It's what the breakers used to be that old. And I don't know what happened to that. I don't know if it was letting water in and out, or I don't know what its function was. And I'm wondering if you could, just as I think about this, if you guys know anything about that.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead.
I.
So, yeah, the way that wetland now drains out,
Yeah.
if this is a bit of a fun one, it goes into the storm drain network that ultimately flows out to Children's Beach. But it doesn't have that much of a flow out of it unless there's a big storm or it's accumulated water through a number of storms. It's able to percolate down most of its own. It's overflow, and you can stand, where the boat trailer parking is. There's kind of a little, maybe about a 3 foot wide outflow area right on the edge of the wetland, and you can see it right inside the split rail fence. And you can follow it where it comes into the storm drains in the road, and then it's taken down to Children's Beach and it flows out there. As I understand it, and from what I'm still trying to come to a lot of the storm drain network, that is the outflow for most of that area. To try and connect even more to that in a storm event for pipes that are undersized within the road network is a very tricky thing to do. We'd have to, like, the storm drain network is already undersized. This would offer a different additional support to the storm drain network. So one of the stories that a chap in the DPW told me once is that there's some box drains out there where there's 3 10-inch pipes coming into one area and an 8-inch outflow. So there's all kinds of storm drain issues in that area that are already going to be pricey to look at and rectify. This would alleviate and keep the issue localized to where the water issue is already at by that turning circle. And then in terms of the aesthetics of it, that's something that we're going to have to work through in the project development. Personally, I just know that grasses and taller vegetation it causes evapotranspiration, so it sucks water out of the ground faster into the leaves of the plant and it releases it to the atmosphere. If it's grass, I'm not really that low grass, whatever it happens to be, but that's something that's going to have to go through the public consultation process and that neighbours are going to have to get input on. And I'm sure that the Brown Point Association will want to have input on, as well as others.
Well, we also have the Brant Point area plan, which speaks to some of that, and the sand plain grasslands, which are very rare and almost unique to Nantucket. I think that there is some of that there. There's some plant material in there that is aqueous. It's like literally on the verge, and I agree that with the amount of water and during storm events, which is usually in the winter, but still, I think we need to try to look at it. I'm just alarmed at the process so far in terms of Brown Point Association.
Well, maybe you could
I will.
go back to them and ask them to pay for it.
Well, no, I don't want them to pay for something that changes it when really what is necessary is to look at the water and harbor health, not beautifying it or adding benches, things.
Well, and again, some of it too, right, like, one of the other goals, it's not directly involved in this project too, right, is the Commonwealth kind of has this directive, and the town has been working on it, is typically for all of our water bodies, stormwater is kind of our third largest contributor of nutrient inputs and contaminant inputs for what we have, right? Depending on which water body, sometimes it gets up to number two. In some local areas, it goes up. Wastewater is typically the highest, so that's, septic and sewers. And then stormwater and synthetic fertilizers can kind of go back and forth depending on where you are and what's going on. So anywhere that we have these direct outfalls, if we can lessen the amount that goes right into the storm drain and then right into the harbor is always for the good, right? Because whatever, we get a bit of rain on the road, it hits that catch basin and goes into the harbor, whatever was on that road. So you'll have, all kinds of chemicals, oils, surfactants, nutrients from other things that just flush right in without collection or treatment. Just in a water quality aspect, to try to intercept that is always for a plus. And so we try to plan for that too. It's just kind of one of those extra benefits that we get.
I feel like, isn't that something that could maybe come out of the environmental justice money?
So environmental justice is a very different purpose.
But this is access to a public area.
Well, yes, but what environmental justice is, we're still developing the plan. We only had the launch, what was it, last Monday week?
Yes.
So we have to work through that for a year in order to understand what the environmental justice needs are. And when you generally talk about environmental justice, it's things like, I'm way off topic here for this wetland, but it's say too many people living in a house, too crowded environment, PFAS related issues, other chemical contaminants, homes that don't have green spaces around them, or trees. Trees is another big one, and shade trees that then reduce the heat within a home. But it's more the effect on the people, not services for the people. So there's a tie-in, but it's a very loose one, if you don't mind me saying it. That way.
Yeah, well, but I feel like that is a little bit of a tie-in for people
We are
who
happy-
access this space. But I hear you, you're trying to,
Well, you
that's
also
what
have to
I
remember,
remember about that program.
But you know, also have to
For that
remember
program, as you well could do some things like in communal spaces.
correct, and get, the other thing we do with EJ is work to get a lot of grants, but you also have to remember that the most effective part of EJ is within the 6 mapped EJ communities. And they're all in the south central part of the island, basically
I
from
know,
here
they're
to here.
probably not over there,
And yeah, this would not qualify within an EJ area.
but I still feel like,
Well-
I'm just telling you, I feel about the rain garden. I think it sounds beautiful and really cool, but it sounds like an experiment. Like an expensive experiment.
I think we could get you some additional information that I think would help
Okay.
explain that better.
Yeah, and they're nothing. I don't have any supporting documents.
Yeah.
So.
No, we'll happily send some more stuff
Yeah.
and some information.
It sounds neat. I mean, I like experiments, so it's not like, that's not what it is.
But
but-
I will say, and typically like those same areas, right? Mid-Island has stormwater concerns, but not necessarily to the same degree, and they don't have the same issues, right? So if you look at an area like Raceway Drive, where there was that ginormous puddle, Somerset and Raceway, like if you're headed to Lycombe Golf Course,
Yeah,
you can use more traditional engineering methods in that area because you have, a 20-foot separation to groundwater and things where here,
yeah.
you're trying to sandwich something in where there's no room to sandwich.
Right.
So
I hear
it's
you.
trying to get a little bit creative, but I also don't think that, if you told everyone, we're gonna install a giant infiltration chamber underneath all of that and let it see what it's gonna do, that you're probably at a much
I think
higher
that
cost.
might make, that's the other thing about it, is if it's perceived as something kind of not tried and tested, then people might. You
Well, I
will
think-
get a lot
I
more
think it
resistance.
is tried and tested when it's right next door already. There's already on Easton Street another functioning rain garden that's actually keeping the street dry, so. There's a neighboring example.
Well, but
Which
it's,
is why they wanted.
it's a
to-
very different area, that's size. It's also, it has a different function since it's not. it's not receiving water from the harbor.
The Easton Street rarely floods in an unusual way. Water gets onto Easton Street in two ways. So first one is harbor water comes straight up Harborview Way, floods into is it North Walker Street, and then floods that intersection right there where that rain garden is, and that's salt water.
Okay,
And then the other one is so I'm talking about storm type pathways here.
I
That's
see.
one of them. That's the northern one
Mhm.
associated with Easton Street. The southern one is kind of split into two parts. It's kind of an A and a B. One comes straight in through the Coast Guard Station Burn Point, and then there's another one that has traditionally come through. I think is it 20 and 24, 20 and 26, those two properties right there, which are directly opposite that rain garden, that area that we're talking about. So those infiltration points are those storm type pathways are a problem, yes, but again, like Jeff said, when the area floods, the whole area floods, this would cause the stormwater to go down faster and to recede faster. It doesn't just flow back into the harbor. It sits on the street, it slowly dissipates, it evaporates. But if you give it somewhere to soak to, that's the
Yeah.
pollution.
I want to make sure that in my comments that I'm not objecting to managing that water. I'm just objecting to, the design elements. That's all. So,
Well, and we'll see, right? Like,
I'll have a design.
we may go through that process, right? This is for design money, may get through that process and. Who knows what
Yeah.
results, right? That's what a public process is for. And
Well,
What
again,
would
the
be involved?
newest things that people are familiar with usually bring on the most questions. So,
And sometimes it's the things that you think will be the most like innocuous and straightforward.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Totally,
what gets crazy, but that's what's
So-
fun, but the important part.
But-
I hate to sound like preaching to the choir here, is people engaging in the process and participating. I mean, that's
I agree.
what it's there for, and if ultimately it turns out that, hey, it's not the right idea for right now, then so be it, but.
Mm.
You have the answer to that question too.
Totally.
It's the old, sometimes no data is still data.
And,
Okay, and Jeff has to go soon
I gotta
too,
go.
so I don't know, Jeff, did you want to talk about fertilizer? Or is Vince gonna talk about that?
I can talk about
You need
fertilizer.
To go, Jeff?
I mean, I can run through, this is this is
Vince,
my
yeah.
last one, and then Vince has the air quality one that he can touch on briefly. It's more his project than mine, so,
Oh, wait a minute, we have this one and then we have the Saskatchewan groundwater mapping
oh, sorry, I missed that one, so,
and air quality, so we have three more.
alright, I can dust through my two
Is
pretty
Dawn,
quickly.
Dawn too?
I don't know, but I got.
She's away, okay,
Yeah,
that's
she,
fine.
Do you guys,
Thanks,
do we have a
Christie.
quorum? No?
Well, Christie is familiar at least with,
Yeah, no, yeah,
you know,
you got, I mean, you started the meeting, so you guys can go talk.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter, yeah, we already started, so we don't have. to-
and you're not taking substantive back,
Yeah.
so to say, not voting to approve any of these, I don't
Thank you,
believe,
Chris.
off the jump.
We don't even have software to do it,
No.
man.
So just
Thanks, Christie.
Just real quickly,
Christie.
I'll do the Sacagawea one first because it's somewhat straightforward. This was in front of you guys last year and we removed it kind of at the end. But what it is we're trying to kind of keep our, our management plans and objectives for our major water bodies kind of up to date on a 10-year cycle. We're doing Nantucket Harbor right now, so we're reevaluating the watershed to make sure that it's sized appropriately and what the groundwater flows and things are to there, what the nutrients are that are contributing to those. And then developing actionable items to reduce what needs to be reduced or enhance what needs to be enhanced, whether they're in water habitats or those things. Again, we're trying to do it on this 10-year rotation. Nantucket Harbors should finish hopefully or 20. The harbor a little bit intense, so we thought doing Sacagawea next would be good. It's also the one that's the most out of date. It kind of supplements the original Mass Estuaries plans that set our TMDLs. But this would be the kind of the 2-year project to re-update that and hopefully give some guidance for what we should be doing and engaging the community to managing the water quality of Sacagawea Pond. Interestingly enough, Sacagawea Pond's also been our biggest problem child for things like harmful algal blooms in the last couple of years. And had a big bacterial strike this year that pretty much shut that water body down for the second summer in a row, so. Trying to get a handle on some of those things is something that we're really trying to do in a meaningful way. Because we want to have our water bodies for people to fish and swim and recreate and do all of those things, so.
Total.
All right.
Madam Chair, can I enter? I don't think we have a quorum anymore. I'm not sure because I can't see the room.
Yeah, but I don't think we have to have a quorum to listen.
Okay,
I didn't think we did. I thought it was just to get going.
okay.
If I'm. Well, Jeff would know better than anybody.
Wait, I feel like it turns into a business meeting because you guys still aren't gonna take, if you guys needed to like take votes. I
Yeah, it
think
would
that
be a
gets
problem, but we
problematic,
don't.
I
It's
think
still
just
listening session.
informational, I
Yeah.
think it's fine.
I think it is. I feel like I've been through
You
this.
guys just have to be really nice to us for this part, even more so than you have been.
We're gonna tell us.
And we'll
You
do-
can tell us.
So I've been hanging over and be like, do you remember that meeting you had without a quorum? Yes to everything from NRG. No,
I do have to wrap it up soon too, so
No.
if you would prefer to wait and so that you can not be stressed
Well-
getting to your next event, then.
no, we're good.
Okay,
Um,
keep going.
I'll go
I gotta
fast
ask
on
the
the difference.
supervisor stuff though, so.
So fertilizer is like the impossible task that we've never been able to figure out. And we have kind of a regulatory requirement that we're having difficulty adjust because the state won't let us.
Hmm.
And so we have a requirement that we're supposed to be licensing people and administering an examination for folks to get that license in some level of training program. So it kind of talks with health, it's a Board of Health regulation, we've always kind of assisted with it. I offered to Rocky to kind of carry this one forward into this year, just simply because. I'm a little older and saltier out here, so I'm dealing with this a little different.
But they are the ones that are supposed to administer this,
Right, and we
but
supplement that,
he's put you up to ask you for the money.
Yes.
Just kidding.
So-
Cause you did before.
no, is,
You're
so-
working together.
yeah, we're working together, and what we're looking to do is to finally just say. We want a formal education program, right? We're not trying to limit. Anyone outside of the existing regulations or BMPs. We're not trying to be crazy, but to get materials to users. Homeowners and then other interested parties for the benefits of fertilizer. How fertilizer works, how it's properly applied. If it's not properly applied, what some of those consequences could be. And then develop what the regulations call for and having a test that's fair and equitable. Because I think the last thing we want to do is have people feel like we can't pass the test because we don't speak English or we didn't go to college or do all of those things. But to most importantly, have this as not just physical handouts, but online and available whenever people want it, right? It's,
Yeah.
hey, I moved to Nantucket, I landscape, I want to get my fertilizer license. It's July. I can take the class, I can do what I need to do, I can pass my test and get licensed and I can get to work. Or, hey, I've been talking to a client, they don't understand why I'm telling them these are what we have to do. Here's the information that you need. As a homeowner, it's something we've struggled with, some of it just because, outreach can be tough. And in full confession from our end a little bit as well. Asking scientists to be that person sometimes is not what they're best at, right? They're good at the science. They're not necessarily good at in that interaction and dealing with that. I think we felt like putting that all together and hopefully addressing it in a really progressive way. And then kind of maintaining it going forward be a lot simpler. But having something that the town isn't trying to develop on the fly to use professionals that focus on education and environmental education and those testing components. To get a high quality product is what we're looking to do is to arm people with good information and not misinformation. And to let our landscapers and homeowners be successful in managing their properties without having impacts and still achieving what they want to achieve.
Well, maybe we could offer them literature for a rain garden instead.
Rain
Right?
gardens,
Maybe rain garden is gonna start a whole new thing.
So
I really
They-
hope not.
So, well,
They're
just hear me
still
out, though,
not
they
that
did do,
effective.
they did do one over on the, cause CRC. Gave money for a rain garden at the White House School.
Yes,
And that was expensive.
so I will say
Not nearly as much as this, but it was pricey.
is there are
But I'd like to go see that when it's done and,
a
Completed.
sneaky amount of rain gardens on this island.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm talking hundreds.
I think we
Oh,
should go on a
right,
rain garden
right.
field trip.
Because what we've seen a lot of times, right, is folks that have to get back onto rain gardens,
Mhm.
but.
Sorry, but
No, but-
I am going somewhere with this.
But rain gardens are interesting because what we've seen people do is. As they've been building and constructing homes. And they're adding gutters to not have impacts on their immediate area around their house and they channel off their water.
Mhm.
No one wants to create puddles in their yards or doing things. So we've seen a lot of landscapers. Be creative to create planted, really attractive areas.
Yeah.
Where they run that water and they diffuse it out. And they're essentially moving all of their impervious surface runoff to gardens and beds that look more like a traditional garden or bed, but they're designed and planted in a way where the species selected, like most people don't think of it, but like our native iris and things are wetland plants, and you see those beautiful purple flowers that are everywhere. They like to have wet feet.
Mhm.
You can run all of your roof runoff to that and have this nice, beautiful garden of iris, and everyone's like, it looks so great. Everyone's like, it's a rain garden. It's really what it is. So you can have those choices and be able to do those. And there are a lot of them. It's just a size and scale and for what you're using it for. And maybe you have 2 or 3, maybe you have 1. But we see them a lot. We see them a lot at the Concom. Sees a
Yeah.
lot of them in permits to deal with runoff on sites. But
I gotta
there are
read about 'em
definitely
all.
a tremendous amount of
What's
those.
involved.
So you mean that you are getting permitting requests through the Concom? For the ability for somebody to plumb their water
Yes.
to a certain area, which
Yep.
you have to permit and say yes. And then are people using native species, because you guys are also, you have purview over that?
In a lot of cases, yes, in certain areas, we don't always require those, but. A lot of our native species are really good at dealing with water. Just for the environment they in, and I'll put my plug in for native species.
Oh, yeah,
Nantucket is a really terrible place for plants to live. It
totally,
is, it sucks.
totally agree.
If
Totally.
you're a plant that has figured out how to live here,
Mhm.
you're really good at it.
Yeah.
They're always the best because they're hardier, they're better, and there are really lovely plants that create. Flowers not year round, but through the seasons that you can pick, and then you can supplement with. The other stuff, your annuals and things that you do to get different pops of color and things, but. I find the gardens that work the best that we've done inspections on and things. That have a blend of natives and then those other landscape plants.
Mhm.
Typically. Are the most successful. Yeah,
No,
I could, again,
No doubt.
I'll talk about planting all day. We could. say
Okay.
another time.
agreed, I love this conversation.
But that's,
Sounds like your garden.
I am the worst gardener in my house, so.
Well, you have a high bar in your
I- I
house,
have-
Jeff, I mean.
I have stiff
dude,
competition.
you're gonna-
I will say,
That's not fair.
but this is, right, this is a conversation that. In my immediate circle, we have a lot about plantings and things and people that come in and. It's true, right, like. It's no secret, I live on a place that has a nursery and to grow flowers, but flowers that start from low stock and seed stock here. You can get the same, like you can go to Home Depot somewhere else and bring that same, I guarantee you, the one that. Grew and developed here. Is better adapted to stay and tends just to be stickier, even in like real short bubbles like that. It's wild to see, cause we. See a lot of people that come in with sad faces with like dead pots, and they're like, I got these plants before I came up from Connecticut,
Yeah,
they're all dead now. But they're the same flowers as those, and those look great. You're like, "No." You can get some of these and you can come back in 3 weeks and be like, that was really great. It happens a lot,
yeah, totally.
but
I
that's,
love talking about that stuff.
yes.
Okay. The thing in the fertilizer is, on the money. at the same time, the town put forward that article, it's, the home rule petition is up the state. I think they had a hearing this week about that,
They
right?
did.
Yeah, and so, I guess Emily Molden and maybe Joanna Roche were there to talk about it or give testimony on that. Is that legislation gonna go anywhere?
So there's two separate home rule petitions and they're very, very different. One of them, I think, well, even that circle of people all agree. Is in like the snowball's chance category, and that was the home rule petition to just prohibit fertilizers.
Right.
That will probably never pass the state house. We could talk about the politics of that for hours after this. The other one is a home rule petition that is sent up to relax the state regulation that doesn't allow us to modify our local regulation. Right, so the state said regulations as of this date, if you have them locally, are set in stone, and we're gonna regulate this exclusively at the state level. And what the home rule petition that they provided testimony on does is it requests a window to be able to make changes and limited amendments to the existing regulation. I know from our end, one of the things we'd like to do is just even have a discussion about switching up how licensing works to have a different licensing structure to say not everyone gets the same license, as maybe your company gets a license and then the guys that are applying don't need to take the same level, or theirs is more focused to direct application and not necessarily the heavy science that goes with how you decide to fertilize and set up a program, because they don't need to know, because they're leaving a shop with a, hey, here's 10 pounds of fertilizer, this is going to 1 Main Street and apply it to the lawn, right? And this is the rate. Different levels. The other thing that we have talked about for doing it is it wouldn't allow for necessarily changes in how nutrients are applied. One of the other pieces that we've discussed is kind of mirroring the state's reporting requirements. Where right now by state law, if you apply fertilizer, you're required to keep information like where you applied, how much you applied, the product you applied, all of the information you would expect to keep. And the state always puts the caveat of you have a certain amount of time to produce that information should we request it.
Hmm.
Dirty secret of the state is they have like one guy for the entire state that does all of that, and it's just not really feasible to do. We had talked about, and even a little group before the pandemic had talked about it when we wanted to try to make this change, and this when this was brought to our attention that we couldn't. Was just to say, we want to be able to ask our landscaping companies, like, what have you put down? Like, what are you using? Just so we can say, that's not what you should be using, or more importantly, at least I think, hey, great job. You guys are really following the rules and really doing a good job, and you're able to document that. That's wonderful. And maybe there's a way for us to publicize people that are following the rules and doing a good job, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that we've talked about internally, if that were to pass. My gut feeling, and honestly, this is a personal opinion. I think anything involving fertilizer at the state level will be hard pressed to pass, even a window like that,
It's never gonna happen.
just because you're dealing with like
But
one of the
Only
biggest.
60 pounds that you're trying to ban, I mean, that's kind of tough to do.
Yeah, well, I think even the one where it's just we wanna modify our regulation to update some of those things, I think they're worried about how that plays in other communities that have regulations in place and kind of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit. And
Right.
I don't know, the lobbies that go with fertilizer at the State House are, they're big and mighty, to say the least, right? So,
I'm sure.
again, trying to work with what we have and create something that does better, because I think we'd all love to see the divide between things like, you know, green lawns equals brown harbors and those stickers running around to the like, you guys don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Well, let's simmer down, everybody, and let's get everybody kind of moving forward with the same information and know that those two things can go together and we can measure that things are going okay, and we can do a better job as a town to do it. Let's figure out how to educate our homeowners, educate our caretakers, educate our users, educate our groups that have misconceptions about the damages and harms that they could do, and try to make some positive progress.
That makes sense.
That's my kumbaya speech for the.
Thank you. I love talking about that. We'll probably have you back to talk about it a little more when everyone else. comes
Yeah, and
in
I'll,
too, 'cause
if you guys are interested,
if people ask about it a lot, I just think it's good for everyone to know. I'm sure you
Yeah.
guys run into this all the time. I feel like I talk about this a lot with people.
and we're happy to, I can provide a little bit more detail and breakdown on that too. I know there's some of the stuff that's attached, but
Yeah,
get it there.
it's a lot of money
So,
and, you know, it's a
So-
lot of asking you all to coordinate. And so we probably just need to.
yeah, so we
And
kind of,
again, why isn't that in the budget every year? If that's gonna keep going forward.
well, so it's the development the first time. I think once it's developed once, updating is probably something that can get absorbed.
After a few
through-
years or something.
Yeah,
I
and,
gotcha.
and those licenses do have a fee attached, right? So you get a 3-year license for
So you
$100
get the
bucks.
money back.
So I think in just kind of our back of the napkin math, if we do about 50% of what we originally licensed back in the 20 teens, that to just keep those up to date, we can probably do just through the licensing fees. And then the rest will fall out through like regular budgeting. I don't think it would be something that would come to you
Yeah.
guys.
This is like a program, a software, a
Yeah.
point of access
This is
for
a-
everybody.
A program development and then maintenance, I think would fall through just the regular like programmatic funding through like the general fund or our program budgeting or the licensing fees that go with it. So
Gotcha.
unless it needed a
makes sense.
complete overhaul, I don't think we would be bad for that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Knock on wood.
Gotcha. Thank you. Does anyone have any other? No. All right, we're the last one. I really have to go and you do too. You have
So,
to go see.
I
your-
I can just give the super high cliff notes on it
Okay.
and call it a day if you
Well,
wish.
I think we'll have you all back anyway, so.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back on track.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
time.
So do you want to hear about the air quality sampling system or do you want it another day? Cliff notes?
Cliff notes.
Cliff notes it is, super fast. When I started with the sustainability office, I did a gap analysis, found out what other towns are doing and what we're not doing. And that's where this came from. That was the origin when I
Wait,
found out that.
Back up. Say that again. Why did you get in?
I started the sustainability office. in the
Yeah.
Natural Resource Department in 2022.
Yeah,
And then one of the things to do first is to understand what I did an assessment of all of the town's sustainability operations.
yeah,
And then I looked at other towns and saw what sustainability operations they were doing to find out what we weren't doing. That's a gap analysis.
yeah.
Did that, and this is one of those things. We don't do air quality here in Nantucket. There's no one understanding or sampling or trying to figure out what our air quality is on Nantucket. What we do really well is water quality. We know exactly or have a very clear picture of our water quality. I also looked at where the nearest air quality sampling stations at the state level are. There's one in the town of Aquina on the west end of Martha's Vineyard, and there's one just south of Provincetown. It's the town of Wellfleet, or is it Truro? It's up there anyway. One is 30 miles that way, the other is close to 50 miles that way. So we get forecast data, but it's mean data. It's not localized data. We don't know what our local risks are. I spoke to, this is a kind of another one of those interdepartmental ones where I spoke to some people in the health department, Rocky Miramontes and Andrew Shapiro, who's the new environmental specialist there, who's looking at things like PFAS. He has some background and experience in this. And then I've started to learn about this and learn how we have no information, none, zero. We don't know what our air quality is. We get kind of mean level state data, which is extremely inaccurate as it seems. So one of the things that we were looking at is, well, what do you measure for? And two critical things are recommended by the state as a minimum. We can measure for other things, but the two critical ones that we need to understand are fine particulate matter and ozone. Ozone is a real serious problem. It causes all kinds of breathing issues, lung issues, particularly for those with diminished health, asthma, the elderly and the very young. This then basically causes forms of lung cancer. And we need to understand what our risks are so that we could do a 10-level warning system to say, all right, our ozone is peaking. For those at risk, consider staying indoors. Ozone is one of those things that's, it's O3. It comes to us in a variety of different ways, and we're particularly badly exposed to it here because of our oceanic environment. It comes from the upper atmosphere, is a main source of it, where it comes down through storms. Storms also have a way of concentrating ozone in a low depression as air swirls and concentrates heavier items, and a heavier O3 is oxygen, 3 oxygen atoms together, slightly heavier, so concentrates in the middle of storms. And as we get storms passing through here, we get increased ozone coming to the island. Lightning is another big source of ozone. As lightning storms happen, say, to the south of us, and we get a lot of our wind from the south, particularly in the summer, it just drifts up the east coast, and we're kind of in a corridor for it, apparently. I've had to do a fair bit of reading about this of late. There's also an interaction that happens between lightning and salt water and salt air that also generates ozone. So it's one of these things we just don't know what our exposure is. But what happens, and from the data that they're seeing over on in the town of Aquina and Martha's Vineyard, they get these tremendous spikes from time to time, and then the whole island gets a warning of sorts.
Oh, and we don't have that kind of
We do
mechanism
not.
here.
The other thing is fine particulate matter. That comes from a variety of sources as well. We have dirt roads are some of the worst. We have a lot of dirt roads on the island as a car drives. I know, they're very picturesque, but they kick up a lot of dust and fine particulate matter, and if that gets into your lungs.
Asphalt, go back to dirt. That would be
Okay.
my dream.
But-
It won't happen, but that'd be my dream.
Well, it's not good for air quality, is all I'm trying to say. But even things like the runway at the airport, when planes touch down hard and they spin up that and the rubber comes off, and the material from the brakes on cars, planes, trucks, you name it, that all kicks up, and that all contributes to the fine
Yes.
particulate matter. So they're the kind of two we should measure. There's another few on top of that we should get a handle on. We're looking at potentially joining a state level, getting accredited and joining a state level program whereby we can get reported along with other state into the state air quality forecasting and have it published there. Failing that, if we knew what our air quality was and were able to put it onto the town website without accreditation, it's just an extra step that doesn't cost that much extra, but you have to do 3 years of data collection to get accredited. But you have to have the device in place before you can do any of that.
Right.
So whether you're accredited or not, we can still put this information on the town website and provide warnings to the public. This is a public health issue, to understand what our risk is, what our exposure is, and those kind of things. In terms of citing it, when I was coming up with the costings for this, we have some town parcels, and I've spoken to Mark Willett of the Water Company, and if we can cite it on their area, in a big area that they have, then the site fees are free, and it's only the equipment annual running and annual maintenance, and that's what's in the 200,000.
I missed that. Can you say that again?
I'm looking at doing it on a town parcel, so that's not included in the
Yeah,
cost.
so he can put a monitor over like at the water department.
So they don't have to like lease land or something, or pay for it, where it goes.
Yeah, and effectively what it is, it's a very, very, very advanced garden shed. Sounds like a lot of money to put into a garden shed, but it's all the monitoring equipment. So you have to have a hut, and the hut has to have it's very specifically designed. I've seen the specifications, and it has to have air conditioning. It has to have for the
Oh,
computers.
to keep it cool.
Yeah, you have to have broadband
That's a lot,
opposed to it,
yeah.
and has to be what is it? There's a distance. I don't remember the distance. It's 20 or 30 yards away from forest edges and that kind of thing. So they have that at the water company. They have locations where we can site it over there. They also have broadband already on site, so it wouldn't be a big extra ask to run to, from a brand new location. It's extension for broadband. Those kind of things is what I'm trying to say, rather than a brand new connection.
Okay. All right.
So it's mostly the equipment, the data logger, the ozone detection device, the fine particulate matter detection device, the electricity to the site, and any landscaping that has to take place around the site to keep grass low so that it doesn't interfere with the building itself.
Okay. I got a lot of questions about this one, so why don't we like cut and have you back,
Sure.
if that's okay, cause this sounds like another interesting,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
one-off.
But again, it's one of these things that.
It's
could pay
new.
off in 2 or 3 different ways.
Mhm.
And it's all about health benefits. That's what this comes down to, providing health warnings for our population. And
Why can't environmental justice pay for this thing?
again, it can't, and I'm sorry to say that because,
Yeah.
and I tried to explain this earlier, in our environmental
Cause
justice.
it's more targeted to the person.
Yes, and it's our,
I hear
when we're talking about EJ, we've 6 mapped areas, but they're all mapped for the exact same reason, for minorities. There's 3 environmental justice types: minorities, low income, and language isolation. And what we don't have language isolation mapped for Nantucket, and we don't have low income mapped for Nantucket, we just have minorities. So unless you're benefiting the minority people within the EJ area, it doesn't apply. And that's the other reason I kind of didn't like it for the Brand Point idea. Plus, it's way outside the mapped area.
Yeah, I hear that for Brand Point. I was just thinking it's a.
Plus, we
public
can't
access
put any
space, but
trees
the-
there. Because it's
but-
historically.
And the salt water wouldn't have the trees. Yeah, I get it.
All right.
All right.
Adjourn. Motion.
Motion to adjourn.
You-
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
I.
So thank you. We're not meeting on Tuesday, guys. We have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday. We are not.
Okay.
And next Thursday, we do have a meeting, but that we'll have